here I've got a site called Simply Analytics. It's a site that we all have access to through the UBC library. And we're going to use this site to query some census data for Lab 3. And it's a pretty powerful tool. Unfortunately, if you're not a member of a large institution like UBC, you can't use this to download the census data. Census data is free and publicly available from Stats Canada. Unfortunately, it's not very easy to download things from their site. So for instance, if you want to download the census data from British Columbia, you have to download it all as one big text file, and it's nearly a gigabyte. And it's just a real pain to work with and download all that data. So some sites like this one do make things a little bit easier, and while at least you have the privilege of access to it through an institution like UBC, to take advantage of that and work with it. So for instance, right now this site, I'm using it to show the total population by province. And if we want to change that, we can look at census metro areas instead, just these large population centers, or if we want to change it to census divisions, we can see the population by census division across the entire country. You can zoom in. And with that, zooming in, you can change the resolution. We can look at population by census tracts across, say, Metro Vancouver. You zoom in more, you can look at population all the way down to the dissemination area level. And so, like I said, most of the dissemination areas have population somewhere between 200 and 700. However, some of them have very, very large values. And these are like areas that have had developments occurring since the last time the census boundaries were redrawn. So every time they conduct the census, they adjust and tweak and redraw some of the boundaries to try and make these census divisions more evenly distributed for the next time. So there's a really wide range of different data that is collected by the census. Right now, we're just looking at the total population count, but you can look at, say, the age. And so this site provides information from the most recent census, which was in 2016, but they also provide estimates based on the census, extrapolating into 2018, 2019, 2020. We'll look at the census record. So for instance, say you want to know the total number of 0 to 14-year-olds. You just turn that layer on. And you can see the total count, or change that. Maybe you want to know the percentage instead. So what is the percentage of the population that is 0 to 4? And this, again, is relative, so the percentage would be the total population of 0 to 4-year-olds divided by the total population of the full census tract. So this is more interesting in the sense that it shows the data is normalized by one variable. So we talk a bit about data normalization in Lab 2, and I'll discuss it more in depth in lecture later, but essentially you calculate a percentage of the population. So the census data products are freely available for download from Stats Canada as well. You can download all the census boundary files, which are fairly easy. That's the things that I showed you here. And you can also download profiles of the census unit. So for instance, if you want to download it at the territorial and provincial level, it's fairly easy. This file is not that big. Open it up here. It's not very well formatted. So for instance, of the provinces and territories, it lists every single variable for each individual unit So it does it for unit 1. And there's just all these different variables. And so you get the answer to every single question that they ask on the census for unit 1 all the way down to unit 12, 48, So each of these numbers corresponds to a different province or territory. And so this is the different unit. That's the number. So it's not very easy to work with, and it's pretty cumbersome. And also, that was just at the provincial level. If you want to download it, say, at the census subdivision level, these files are much, much larger, and you have to download them by province. So, for instance, the census subdivisions just for British Columbia, the file is 179 megabytes, and it's actually too large for Excel to open. So these files quickly get out of hand, and if you look at it at the dissemination area unit level, these compressed files are 500 plus megabytes. When you extract them, they're well over a gigabyte just for certain regions. So this isn't exactly the easiest or most accessible way to operate or work with census data. So even though it's freely available to the public, it's pretty cumbersome. We've also got access to another census analyzer through UBC, through the University of Toronto, where you can also interact with and download census data for different levels. Again, it's not as user-friendly as Simply Analytics, but it is a bit more flexible, I'd say. So you can look at the profile of different census tracts. You can search for, say, Vancouver, and then you can see sort of in a more organized format all the variables that are available. So whereas Simply Analytics, you're left sorting through all of these different variables, trying to figure out what exactly they are. This one's another option for downloading census data. And so you can select population, or you can see the age and sex variables that they have, the language variables, immigration, Indigenous and visible minority status, education, variety of things. And so you download these data as text files or CSV files or database files, and then you can join them to the data here. So I will go through an example. Let's download the census tract data. Let's figure out all of the population 0 to 14. Download this as a DBase file. Submit your query. So it downloads this weirdly named text file. You can add it. And then you can do what's known as a join. So you did a join in Lab 2. You got an introduction to that. The way a join works, if you look at the attribute table for the census data, there's this thing called a CTUID, which is a census tract unit identifier. And if you look in the attribute table for this, unfortunately, downloading the data from the site doesn't label the columns that you downloaded, but this is the CTUID and this is the population. So you can simply do a join, go to joins and relates, add a join. Got the census tracts, and then the join field is going to be the CTUID, and it's smart enough to match these up. You click OK.